That little flame just found $750 a year walking out of your house. No draft, no open window, no hole you can point to from below. Just your air, conditioned air you paid to heat or cool, silently moving through a gap in the ceiling plane directly into the attic every hour of every day, all year long. That's one gap. In a typical American home, I'll find 30 before I put the candle down. I'm Philip Hayes, 41 years at Bell Labs, where we learned early that the invisible failures are always the expensive ones. I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, watching my grandfather build houses the way houses were meant to be built. Tight, deliberate, sealed against the weather before a single piece of insulation went in. He understood something the modern insulation industry found inconvenient to acknowledge. 9 in 10 American homes are under-insulated. But that's not the full problem. The full problem is what comes before the insulation, a step almost nobody does. And you're paying for the skip every month. Give me 20 minutes. Let me describe something you may have felt without knowing what to call it. One room that's never quite right. Too hot in summer, too cold in winter, no matter what you set the thermostat to. A utility bill that seems high for the square footage, and a vague sense that the house is spending your money somewhere you can't locate. You've been told it's the windows, the age of the house, that this is just what this kind of home costs to run. Here's what Energy Star and the Department of Energy have been documenting for decades, and what the insulation industry brochures reliably leave out. 90% of American homes are under-insulated. That's the number. 1 in 10 houses in this country meets the current DOE standard. But here's the part that changes everything. For most of those homes, adding more insulation without sealing the air leaks first leaves 15 to 25% of the possible savings untouched. Not because the insulation is bad, because insulation doesn't stop air. It slows heat. Those are two completely different physical processes, and confusing them has been costing American homeowners billions of dollars collectively for 50 years. A lot of what I teach here comes from builder's knowledge. My grandfather's generation applied without thinking about it. I've put the most practical of it together in something called Ancestral Vault. Links in the description. No specific dollar promises from me, just the working knowledge that stopped being transmitted somewhere around 1975. Now, let's go up into the attic. Before we do, I want to ask you something directly, and I want to do the CTA a little differently today. If your thermostat has ever felt like it was in an argument with the house, you set it to 72, the house decides it has other opinions. You've felt this problem. That's air. That's exactly what this video is about. So here's what I'm asking. If that sounds like your house, hit like. Not as a favor to me, as a signal to YouTube that this problem is real for someone watching, and that the next person who's been paying that bill for years without knowing there's a fix should see this video. 1 second of your time, potentially hundreds of dollars for the next person who gets the recommendation. That's a trade I think is worth making. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe. 1 problem per week, 1 old school fix. No filler, no padding. Engineers don't have patience for wasted words, and neither does this channel. And here's what I most want to know before we go up. Has anyone here actually gone into their attic and tested for air leaks? Not hired someone, gone up themselves, with any tool at all, and looked. What did you find? And how much do you think it was costing you? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and the answers on this channel routinely run more interesting than the videos. All right, bring a candle. Here's what builders understood before air conditioning made the envelope seem like a lower priority. In the 1930s and 1940s, before central cooling, before the post-war housing boom changed every assumption in the construction industry, the house itself was the climate system. There was no compressor to compensate for a leaky ceiling. Cold air that came in stayed in. Hot air that rose to the top of the house settled there until you moved it deliberately. My grandfather built 3 houses in his life in the Blue Ridge foothills outside Roanoke. He was not a formally trained engineer. He was a man who understood that you don't insulate a leaky vessel. You fix the leak first. He caulked every ceiling penetration, filled every gap at the top plate of every wall, fitted the attic hatch like a cabinet door. Then the insulation crew came in. That sequence wasn't a preference. It was physics. Hot air rises. When it reaches the ceiling and finds an opening, any opening, a gap around a wire run, a crack at a wall joint, it escapes into the attic. Cooler air pulls in from below to replace it. The house becomes a slow, continuous pump, exchanging the air you paid to condition for the air outside, all day, every day for free, because nobody sealed the circuit. R value tells you how well insulation resists heat moving through it by conduction. It says nothing about the air moving around it. And the air was always the real thief. Here's how the shift happened, and it happened with a product, as these things usually do. After World War II, construction was moving at a pace it had never sustained before. Suburbs, tract homes, developments where a finished house could mean a completed unit every working day. Speed was the requirement. The crew that spent 3 hours sealing every ceiling penetration before the insulation went and cost money the timeline didn't have. Batts of fiberglass, light, fast, measurable in R value, became the standard. The seal-first principle didn't get refuted. It got inconvenient. And by the 1970s, when energy costs started climbing, the industry had a ready answer. More insulation. Always more R value. Never, have you sealed your attic floor first? I want to tell you about a couple I'll call the Harrises. Solid home, mid-century construction, recently updated. They'd had a contractor add insulation the previous spring, brought them to R49, the top of the DOE's recommendation for their climate zone. Their heating bill that winter was nearly identical to the year before. They were ready to file a complaint. I went up with a flashlight and a candle. Around every single one of their 11 recessed light fixtures, there was a gap between the housing and the drywall. At 2 of them, I could see daylight from the attic side. I could feel the air current with my open hand from 3 feet away. Those gaps were the entire story. R49 sitting on top of them hadn't changed what air does when it finds an opening. All right, the candle test. Under $1. Here is how to use it. Run this when your heating or cooling system is on, when there's pressure differential between inside and outside. That pressure drives the leaks and makes them visible to the flame. Go up into the attic. If it's summer, go before 9 in the morning. Attic temperatures in July can pass 140 degrees Fahrenheit by early afternoon, and that is not a safe working environment for anyone alone. Work in intervals, tell someone you're up there, and bring water. If your house was built before 1980 and you find insulation that looks like dense gray felt or loose granular material, photograph it and back away. Have it tested for asbestos before disturbing anything. That test runs under $200. What it prevents costs considerably more. In any other attic, hold the candle near each of these 5 locations and watch the flame. 1. Recessed light fixtures. Every one is a gap between your living space and the attic. The flame shows exactly how much air is moving through each. 2. Plumbing and wiring penetrations. Every pipe and wire run into the attic passes through a hole, almost always larger than what's using it. 3. The attic hatch or pull-down stair. Typically the worst single performer in the house. No weather stripping, no insulation on the attic face, a large unprotected opening to unconditioned space. 4. The top plates of interior walls where framing meets ceiling. Gaps run the full length of the wall and are invisible from below. 5. Where a chimney or combustion flue passes through the ceiling plane. This one requires specific materials, which I'll cover next, along with a warning you should not skip. What to do with what the candle found. The sequence is the whole lesson. Seal first, then insulate. Every time, no exceptions. The DOE quantifies what happens when you skip sealing. 15 to 25% of potential savings remain unrealized, even with a perfect insulation job on top. You can have R60 in your attic and still lose meaningful conditioning to air moving through unsealed gaps. Insulation resists heat. It does not stop air for gaps smaller than 6 millimeters, small cracks at wall ceiling joints, hairline separations, standard paintable latex caulk. A few dollars. 30 minutes of work that will outlast most appliances in the house. For gaps up to about 7.5 centimeters, around plumbing stacks and wire runs. Expanding spray foam in a can. Available everywhere. Fills the void. Seals on contact. Done. For the attic hatch or pull-down stair, weather stripping on the perimeter frame, and a rigid foam cover on the attic face. The two together address what is often the single worst leakage point in the entire house. Now, the chimney, gas flue, any combustion appliance vent. Stop. Hear this clearly. No foam, no caulk, no flexible material near a flue. The area where a combustion vent passes through the ceiling plane requires sheet metal flashing and a fire-rated sealant, rated for the temperatures that surface actually reaches. Spray foam near a flue is a documented fire hazard. There is no version of this step where flexible material is acceptable. Sheet metal. Fire-rated sealant. Full stop. Seal those 5 points in that material order. Then add insulation on top. Let me show you what the candle test actually looks like in a real house. The Harris's attic. flame bending at 9 of 11 recessed fixtures. At 3 of them, not bending, going nearly horizontal. At the top plate of the exterior facing walls, a steady lean you could follow the full width of the attic. At the hatch, the worst point in the house, a pull strong enough to feel with an open hand from 6 inches away. This isn't a drafty old house with obvious problems. This is a maintained, updated home with professional insulation at R49, the highest DOE rating for its region. This is every house. I've run this test in homes built in 1948 and homes completed in 2007. The 5 locations are almost always the same. The magnitude varies. The addresses change. The physics doesn't. We sealed 9 fixtures, foam and rigid covers, hardware store materials, sealed the plumbing runs, weather stripped and covered the hatch. 4 hours of work for 2 people. No new insulation. Their heating bill the following winter dropped by an amount they noticed without being told to look for it. Now, here is the number I'd wager most people watching this have never heard, and it changes the math on everything. The federal government will currently reimburse 30% of the cost of attic air sealing and insulation, up to $1,200 per year, through 2032. The Inflation Reduction Act. Energy Star administers the credit. It applies to materials you purchase and install yourself, not only contractor work. 30% back on a project that, for most households, already pays for itself in under 3 years without the credit. That's not a promotional offer. That's a line in the federal tax code. A few things before we come back downstairs, and I want you to hear them the way my father would have delivered them. Not as warnings, as facts. If you find insulation matted, discolored, or in unusual shapes, especially if it's a loose-form fibrous material in a pre-1980 home, or any granular material that looks like small pebbles, photograph it, step back, and have it tested before touching anything. Asbestos testing is not expensive. Asbestos exposure has no retroactive management. If you're working in summer, go in the morning, bring water, and give yourself permission to stop and return the next day. Heat in an enclosed attic is not a discomfort. It's a real danger. Don't underestimate it. When you've finished sealing, come back up with a candle and verify. Run the same 5 locations again. A flame that now holds steady where it bent before is a closed leak. A flame that still bends is a gap you missed. Find it and fill it before you lay insulation on top. Here's where I want to leave the argument. My grandfather never read a Building Science Corporation white paper. He never calculated a payback period. He understood something simpler. A house is a vessel. You don't insulate a leaky vessel, you seal the leak first. That principle didn't go anywhere. It sat quietly in old builders' notebooks while an industry built its business model around selling insulation by the roll and measuring performance in R-value. Not because air sealing is hard, because it doesn't sell itself in a catalog the way a higher R rating does. Now you know the sequence. Now you know what a candle can find in 30 minutes that no insulation quote will tell you. Use it. Let's go back to the beginning. That candle in the attic. The flame bending. No draft, no window, just your air. Moving through a crack you couldn't see from below. On its way into a space you don't heat or cool. On its way out of your house. Now imagine running it again after sealing the 5 points. Same locations, same candle, same attic. The flame is still. That's the principle my grandfather applied without a name for it. Seal the envelope, then insulate. The air was always the thief. The only question was whether you'd shown it where not to go. Has anyone here actually gone into their attic and tested for air leaks? What did you find? And how much do you think it was costing you? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. One more thing before you close this out. If this video caught your attention because you're tired of a house that seems to work against you, there's one that belongs in the same afternoon. Last week I showed how a dryer vent that looks completely fine on the outside can be carrying enough compacted lint to account for more than a third of the 15,000 dryer fires this country sees every year. And how a $20 brush kit in 20 minutes fixes it completely. It's in the card above this video. Both problems live in the same house. Both get ignored for the same reason.